Hey, today I want to talk to you about one thing and one thing only. Actually, I want to talk about two things. The two things that I want to talk to you about today are opposite integers and absolute value. So, both of these topics have to do with positive and negative numbers. In particular, they have everything to do with integers, which hopefully we know by now are positive and negative whole numbers. Numbers like -2, numbers like -7, numbers like +4, or I don't know, how about -2317. So these are all examples of integers. Some of these integers are negative, some of them are positive, and that's really the theme of today's lesson. So, as we know, some numbers are negative and some numbers are positive. So, the whole idea of an opposite integer is to look at the very middle of this number line. And on this number line, right in the middle, we have the number 0. Now, an opposite integer is talking about what you would find on the exact opposite end of this number line, provided that 0 is right in the middle. So let's just try a couple examples. Let's try the number, I don't know, -3, which is over here because it's 1, 2, 3 spaces from 0 on the number line. Now, if I were to look at the number 3, I know that between it and 0, there are a total of 3 spaces. Now, on the other side of the number line, 3 spaces over, I get the number +3. So, that means that the opposite of -3 is +3. That's really all I'm talking about when I'm talking about opposite integers. Just whatever number is on the other side of the number line. A really simple way to think about it is just by looking at what we call the sign of a number. So the opposite of -3 is +3. So a significant portion of the number stays the same. So the blue part that I'm drawing here, the actual value of the number, that stays the same. The only thing that changes is the sign. We went from -3 to +3. That's all that changes, is something that we mathematicians like to call the sign of the number. Okay, so these are called the sign of the number. So the opposite of an integer is the same number, just the only thing that changes is the sign. Now, I'm kind of using some of this vocabulary not in the best way. So let's just straighten out our vocabulary and talk about this portion of the number. So this is not called the sign. Right here, this is called the absolute value. The absolute value of the integer. So the absolute value is just whatever number is left over. So if I were to ask you, what's the absolute value of -7, the answer would just be 7. I don't have to think about positives or negatives. The absolute value is just the number itself. Whereas the sign is all about whether or not the number is negative or positive. So without using a number line, let's do 2 quick examples. So let's calculate the opposite of each of these integers. So just thinking about opposite integers, this -2 over here, remember the only thing that I have to think about is the sign of the number. So I'm going to change that negative into a positive, and then I'm going to copy the absolute value, and that's it. That's really all there is to it. Again, with this +4, all I have to think about is the sign. So So I just need to change the sign to a negative, and I copy out the absolute value. Finally, this last one, we're looking at that negative 8. So I'm going to change that negative into a positive and copy the absolute value again. And that's it. Simple as that. Now let's talk about absolute value. So I've got 3 numbers that I want to find the absolute value of. Now remember, the absolute value is just the number portion of the integer itself. So what value does this integer have? So we don't care about what's happening over here. We don't care about the sign. All we care about is that 3. So to write this one down, all we would do is write the actual value, which is 3. Now, keep in mind that just because 2 integers are different doesn't mean that their absolute value has to be different too. So I've got that the absolute value of negative 3 is just 3, but the absolute value of positive 3, that's also 3, because here we just don't care about that sign. So we just take the sign away and all we get is 3. Finally, the absolute value of negative 12, well, it's just 12. That's all there is to it. So I hope that this video was straightforward. It wasn't meant to be confusing or challenging at all. It's mostly just about building vocabulary. So the 2 terms that I really want you to have taken away from this video are opposite and absolute value. Okay, thanks for watching.